In an article by highly touted Foreign Policy magazine and Intelligence magazine, uh, it lists what they believe will be next year's wars for 2012. In a foreign policy interview with International Crisis Group, they were asked to evaluate which man-made disaster could explode in the coming year. I will only be highlighting a few that I believe are significant in the world of Bible prophecy. Of course, the top pick by most intelligence reports is Syria. Many in Syria and abroad are now banking on the regime's imminent collapse and assuming everything will get better from that point on. The reality could turn out to be quite different, though, as dynamics in both Syria and the broader international arena turn squarely against the regime. Many hope that the bloody stalemate finally might end. But however much it now seems inevitable that President Basher Al-Assad will leave the stage from or after his regime's terrifying brutality over the recent months, the initial post-Assad stages carry enormous risks. On the one hand, the emotionally charged communal polarization, particularly around the Alawite community, has made regime supporters dig in their heels, believing it is kill or be killed, and their fears of large-scale retribution when Assad falls are very real. On the other hand, the rising strategic stakes have heightened the regional and wider international competition among all players, who now view the crisis as an historic opportunity to decisively tilt the regional balance of power. In that explosive mix, the first cross-border concern is surely Lebanon. The more Assad's ouster appears imminent, the more Hezbollah and its backers in Tehran will view the Syrian crisis as an existential struggle designed to deal them a decisive blow, and the greater the risk that they would choose to go for broke and draw to launch attacks against Israel in an attempt to radically alter the focus of attention. A powder keg doesn't begin to describe it. The danger is real that any one of these issues could derail or even foreclose the possibility of a successful transition. And of course that segues right into the Israel-Iran issue. Even if Iran and Israel somehow manage to sail safely past the rocks of the Syrian crisis, the enmity between them over the nuclear issue could blow them very dangerously off course. Those sanctions against Iran and the saber-rattling all around intensified at the end of 2011, some may see this as merely the continuation of a long-term trend in the epically poor relations between Iran and Israel. Two factors make 2012 a possible turning point for the worse, however. First, the most recent International Atomic Energy Agency report is particularly unambiguous. It may not have turned up significantly new evidence of Tehran's intentions to build a nuclear weapon, but it did highlight more clearly than ever before Iran's obfuscation and unwillingness to cooperate with the international body. Second, the U.S. elections will force support for Israel onto the U.S. domestic agenda even more than usual, and generally create a favorable environment for Israel to act, with any number of unexpected, unintended, and potentially disastrous consequences. In other news, in an article by the Daily Beast, both Israel and the U.S. are in talks over what the trigger will be that will finally bring about a strike against Iran. U.S. officials are now trying to convince Israel that there's no need for a unilateral attack, that the U.S. also has a red line in which they believe Iran cannot cross, and that would trigger an attack by them. In response to Israel and the U.S.'s threats, Iran has said that they would, in case of an attack, they would shut down the Straits of Hormuz and it'd be as easy as taking a drink of water. But the truth of the matter is, with all the U.S. military might in the region, those are basically empty threats. It might shut down for a very short amount of time, but the U.S. would have the Straits under control in a very short period. In other news, and this is I think one of the bigger news articles that I believe, it says that the U.S. is urging Egypt to maintain its peace treaty with Israel. And in a Jerusalem Post article, it says maintaining the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty has been the central issue in secret U.S. discussions with Egypt's military rulers. In an article by the BBC, it's entitled "World Dangerously Unprepared for Future Disasters." The article notes that the world is simply unprepared for what is to come, and that they better wake up. Of course, this is more of a financial article rather than what is to come. It's basically stating that that many of the countries of the world have failed to keep up with payments to the organization in order to help speed relief to countries who have been hit the hardest. But the truth of the matter is, when the tribulation period begins, this humanitarian fund will be a drop in the bucket. As many of you know, 2011 was the worst year on record for natural disasters. This following the worst decade on record for natural disasters. And as I've said for years, don't look for that trend to get better anytime soon. I fully expect earthquakes to continue to increase both in number and intensity, which records show that they have, and I fully expect other natural disasters to continue to increase also in strength and intensity as we draw closer to the coming of the Lord. And finally, Vladimir Putin has decided to reach out to opposition leaders of his coming presidency, but truthfully speaking, don't expect him to be stepping down anytime in the near future. Vladimir Putin is no different than his communist counterparts of old, and I fully expect him to move quickly into a dictator-like rule, just as his counterparts have. And frankly, I don't foresee him ever giving up his position as ruler of what will be in the future a communist Russia. I fully expect him to be the leader of the Gog and Magog war that I believe is coming upon the world in a very short amount of time. This is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.